The summer rain pattered against the windows of Rosewood Cafe, a quaint establishment nestled in the heart of Boston's financial district. Inside, the warm glow of pendant lights illuminated a space where the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the scent of buttery pastries. Amidst the busy lunch rush, Haley Bennett stood at the entrance, her 5-year-old daughter, Charlotte, clinging to her hand. Their clothes were slightly damp from the downpour, and Charlotte's blonde pigtails drooped under the weight of rainwater. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Charlotte whispered, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Haley scanned the crowded cafe, her heart sinking as she noticed every table was occupied except for one in the corner. A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit sat alone, focused intently on his laptop. He had dark, slightly graying hair at the temples and a stern expression that made Haley hesitate. "Just a minute, sweetie," Haley said, adjusting the weathered tote bag on her shoulder that contained her resumes and portfolio. She had just finished another disappointing job interview, her third this week. With rent due in 5 days and barely enough in her bank account to cover groceries, Haley couldn't afford another upscale cafe meal. But Charlotte needed lunch, and the downpour outside showed no signs of letting up. Taking a deep breath, Haley approached the table. The man didn't look up as she stood before him, his fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. "Excuse me," Haley said, her voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Can I share this table?" The man looked up, his penetrating blue eyes meeting hers with mild surprise. His gaze shifted briefly to Charlotte, who was partially hiding behind her mother's legs, then back to Haley. For a moment, he seemed to be calculating something in his mind. "Only if I pay the bill," he replied, his deep voice carrying a hint of authority that suggested he wasn't accustomed to hearing the word no. Haley's cheeks flushed. "That's not necessary. We can pay for our own meal." "I insist," he said, closing his laptop and extending his hand. "Daniel Westbrook." Haley hesitated before shaking it. "Haley Bennett, and this is Charlotte." Daniel gestured to the empty chairs. "Please, join me." Reluctantly, Haley helped Charlotte into a seat and sat down opposite Daniel. She couldn't shake the feeling that accepting his offer somehow put her at a disadvantage, but pride wouldn't feed Charlotte. A waitress approached, and Daniel ordered coffee for himself and asked what they would like. "Chicken nuggets and apple juice, please," Charlotte said, suddenly finding her voice. "I'll just have a small salad," Haley added, deliberately choosing one of the less expensive menu items. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Add a club sandwich to the lady's order," he told the waitress, who nodded and left. "I didn't ask for a sandwich," Haley said, feeling a flicker of irritation. "You look like you could use more than just a salad," Daniel replied matter-of-factly. "Interview didn't go well?" Haley stiffened. "How did you—" "Portfolio bag, formal attire that's slightly too worn for someone who already has a job." The look of disappointment. He shrugged. "I make it my business to read people." "And what business is that exactly?" Haley asked, trying to regain some control over the conversation. "I run Westbrook Industries," he said casually, as if everyone should recognize the name. Haley did recognize it. Westbrook Industries was one of the largest property development firms on the East Coast. They owned half the skyscrapers in downtown Boston, including, she realized with a jolt, the building where she'd just interviewed. "You're that Westbrook?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "The very same." Charlotte, who had been quietly observing the adults, suddenly piped up. "My mommy is the best graphic designer in the whole world." Daniel turned his attention to the child, his expression softening slightly. "Is that so?" "Uh-huh." Charlotte nodded enthusiastically. "She makes pretty pictures for computers, but nobody wants to hire her because they're stupid." "Charlotte," Haley admonished, though she couldn't help but smile at her daughter's unwavering support. "Well, I think the people who didn't hire your mom might have made a mistake," Daniel said to Charlotte, before looking back at Haley with newfound interest. "Graphic design, huh? What's your specialty?" "Brand identity and UI/UX design," Haley replied, surprised by his interest. "I worked for Patterson & Brown for 5 years before they downsized last winter." Recognition flickered in Daniel's eyes. "They did some impressive work. Do you have samples with you?" Before Haley could answer, their food arrived. Charlotte immediately dove into her chicken nuggets, temporarily forgetting the conversation. Haley hesitated, then reached into her tote bag and pulled out her tablet. "These are some of my recent projects," she said, unlocking the screen and passing it to him. Daniel took the tablet and began scrolling through her portfolio with the same intense focus he'd given his laptop earlier. Haley watched nervously as he examined her work, his expression unreadable. She used the opportunity to study him more closely. Despite his intimidating presence, there was something else there, a hint of weariness around his eyes, perhaps loneliness. The wedding ring she'd noticed earlier had a worn look about it, yet it seemed too small for his finger, as if he'd lost weight but couldn't bring himself to have it resized. "This is quite good," he said finally, pausing on a comprehensive rebranding campaign she'd done for a local brewery. "Very good, actually." He handed the tablet back to her. "Why hasn't someone snapped you up yet?" Haley took a bite of her sandwich to buy herself time before responding. "The market's competitive, and I have limitations on my availability." "Single mum," she added, nodding toward Charlotte, who was happily drawing on a children's menu with crayons the waitress had brought over. Daniel nodded, understanding dawning on his face. "No flexible hours offered, or remote work options," Haley sighed. "Most places want someone in office from 9 to 6, sometimes later. After-school care is expensive, and Charlotte's father isn't in the picture to help." A shadow passed over Daniel's face at the mention of Charlotte's father. He glanced at his watch, a subtle but clearly expensive timepiece, and then looked out the window at the rain, which had finally begun to let up. "Westbrook Industries is launching a new subsidiary focusing on sustainable housing developments," he said suddenly. "We need to establish a distinctive brand identity separate from our corporate work. Our marketing department is," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "adequate for our current needs, but this project requires a fresh perspective." Haley set down her fork, her heart beginning to race. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Westbrook?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to pitch for a contract," he clarified. "We're interviewing design firms next week. I can add you to the schedule." Hope bloomed in Haley's chest, but years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." Daniel's gaze shifted to Charlotte, who was now humming softly as she colored. "Let's just say I have a soft spot for determined single parents." Something in his tone suggested personal experience, but before Haley could inquire further, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "Wednesday, 2 p.m. Ask for me at reception." As Haley took the card, their fingers brushed momentarily. She felt an unexpected